12 specialists walked up the drive of that house on the bluff, certain they could make one 8-year-old boy speak. Every one of them left with nothing but the sound of their own voice still ringing in their ears. The boy was not defiant. That was the part nobody in the reports understood. Silas Rourke sat where he was told to sit. He held the picture cards. He looked at the therapist's mouth when she shaped a word. He was polite and patient and utterly, immovably silent. 14 months of silence. Not one word since the night of the accident on the Malahat. They came with their credentials and their laminated charts. A speech-language pathologist from Vancouver, a child psychiatrist flown in from Toronto and put up at the Empress, a play therapist, a neurologist who ordered scans and found nothing wrong with the machinery of the boy's throat or brain, a man who cost $1,100 an hour and left after 9 sessions with a phrase Emmett Rourke would remember for the rest of his life. There is nothing physically preventing him. Each of them studied Silas. Silas studied them back. He learned what each of them needed, a breakthrough, a note for the file, a small victory to justify the bill. And then he withheld it, gently, the way a child holds a cup out of reach. Every silence asked the same question, and none of them heard it. Will you stay if I never say a word? Emmett Rourke, 47 years old, told himself the right specialist simply hadn't arrived yet. He wrote the cheques. He forwarded the referrals. He replaced one expert with the next, the way he replaced underperforming vendors at his company. What he did not do was sit on the floor of his son's room and be quiet with him. Then in the first week of April, a woman named Ines Cardoso came up that same drive with a canvas bag of seed packets on one shoulder and her 6-year-old daughter holding her free hand. She had not been hired to heal anyone, she had been hired to bring the gardens back. 11 days later, Emmett Rourke came home at dusk, and stopped with his hand still on the car door, because somewhere behind the house in the wet gray light under the old apple tree, he could hear his son laughing. The house sat above the water in Oak Bay, 3 stories of cedar and glass, built into the slope so that the sea filled every window on the east side. From the road you could not see it at all. From the water it looked like something a magazine would photograph in July, when the Gary Oaks were out and the light came off the Salish Sea in long silver sheets. Emmett Rourke had built it in the year Silas was born. He had made his money in medical imaging software, algorithms that help radiologists see what human eyes missed. There was an irony in that, and it did not escape him, though it took him 14 months to feel it. Before the house had been loud. Delia Rourke had been the kind of woman who sang badly and often, who left her reading glasses on every surface, who put a radio in the kitchen and one in the greenhouse and never turned either of them off. She grew heritage tomatoes she could not keep alive and cutting flowers she gave away by the armful. Silas trailed her through the beds with a plastic watering can, sober and serious, telling her the names of things. He talked constantly then. That was the detail Emmett could not stop turning over. The boy had been a talker. The night it happened was a Thursday in February. Delia was driving Silas home from a school music night in Duncan, over the Malahat, in the rain. Emmett was in Seattle. He had promised to be there, and then a client had moved a meeting, and he had called from the airport and said the thing he had said 100 times, the sentence he would give anything to unsay. There will be other concerts. A logging truck lost its load on the northbound curve. The car went into the rock face on the passenger side. Silas walked out of it with a hairline fracture in his left wrist and no other injuries at all. He did not speak in the ambulance. He did not speak at the hospital. He did not speak at the funeral, or at his 8th birthday, or on the first morning of grade 3 when the school phoned at 9:10 to ask whether he had been dropped off, because he had not spoken to anyone all day and would not indicate whether he was ill. In January, after 2 terms of aids and accommodations and a boy who sat still as furniture, the school and Emmett had agreed, in that careful language people use when they are giving up, that Silas would learn at home for a while. A tutor came Tuesdays and Thursdays. She left worksheets. He filled them in correctly and handed them back, and never once looked at her. So the house was silent in April, and it had been silent for a long time, and the man in it had gotten used to how much room silence takes up. Emmett worked. That was the thing he was good at. He took calls in the office off the front hall with the door shut. He answered email at the kitchen island at 11 at night with a plate of something reheated beside him. He read the specialist's reports the way he read quarterly numbers, looking for the line that would tell him what to do. He was not cruel. He never raised his voice. He simply arranged his life so that he was rarely in the same room as the thing that frightened him, and he told himself this was providing. Mrs. Boyd, who had kept house for the family since before Silas was born, watched him do it. She said nothing. She was 63 and had buried a husband, and she had learned that some men have to walk all the way around a wound before they can stand in front of it. The 12th specialist quit on a Friday in late March. She was a woman in her 50s from a clinic in Nanaimo, and she was the only one who had never once tried to bribe Silas with anything. She sat with him, she drew, she waited. After 11 weeks she wrote Emmett a note and left it on the hall table under her invoice, and it was 1 paragraph long, and the last line of it was handwritten. Mr. Rourke, I have nothing further to offer. Please understand what I am telling you. Your son is not withholding speech. He is protecting someone. Until you find out who, no one is going to help him. Emmett read it standing in the front hall with his coat still on. Protecting someone. The word irritated him. It sounded like a riddle, the sort of soft thinking he had spent his career engineering around. There was no one to protect. His mother was dead. His father paid for everything. He put the note in his coat pocket. He kept it there for 11 days, and every time his hand went in for his keys, his fingers found the folded corner of it. The gardens had gone feral by then. Nobody had touched them since the February of the accident. The greenhouse glass was green with algae. Delia's beds had gone to bindweed and thistle. Emmett had walked past it every day for over a year and had never once, not once, looked directly at it. Mrs. Boyd hired the gardener. She did not ask permission, which was unlike her, and Emmett was too tired to object, which was unlike him. The agency sent a woman named Ines Cardoso. There was one condition on the file, and Mrs. Boyd read it aloud to him. The woman's daughter came with her, weekday afternoons until the school year ended and all day after that. Emmett almost said no. Another child in the house, another small loud thing to be managed, another set of needs, another person who would eventually see how badly he was failing and would leave the way everyone left. He was too tired to argue. He said yes with half his mind on a term sheet, and by the time he understood what he had agreed to, she was already at the gate. She did not arrive in a car. She came up from the bus stop on foot, a quarter of a kilometer uphill in a fine gray rain, a canvas bag over one shoulder and a battered blue thermos sticking out of it. She wore a work jacket and rubber boots and no makeup at all. Her hair was pulled back. She was 39 years old, though the calm in her face made her seem older. The particular calm of someone who has already carried the heaviest thing she is going to carry and knows the weight of it exactly. The child beside her was 6. She had a knitted toque pulled down over her ears in April, and she was holding with both hands a bent object made of soup spoons. They stopped at the gate. The little girl looked up the drive at the house rising out of the trees and said, "It's t," and stopped and breathed and tried again. Too big. Her mother did not finish the word for her. She did not sigh. She waited the whole way through, all 4 seconds of it, as though there were nothing in the world she would rather be doing. "Big isn't the same as full, love," she said. Then she pressed the buzzer. Emmett opened the door himself. He had a call in 20 minutes and a phone in his hand, and he had already decided what this woman would be. Apologetic, overeager, nervous around money. Most people were. Ines Cardoso was not. She looked at him steadily. Rain ran off the shoulders of her jacket onto the slate. She said Mr. Rourke and waited, and did not fill the silence with anything. That was the first thing he noticed. Everyone filled his silences. She let his sit there like a chair he could take or leave. "The agency mentioned a child," he said. "They did, and you approved it. No apology in it, no challenge either. Just a fact set down carefully between them like something breakable." Behind her the little girl peered around her hip. "My daughter Ren," Ines said. "She'll be in the garden with me. She won't come inside without being asked." Emmett looked down at the girl. She lifted the thing in her hands slightly, as if presenting credentials. 8 bent spoons and a piece of driftwood and a green glass fishing float, strung on a snarl of fishing line. "That's a wind chime," he said. The girl shook her head. She took a long deliberate breath, the way somebody had clearly taught her. "It's a tit-talker." Emmett had nothing to say to that. "There's a boy in the house," he said finally to the mother. "My son, he's 8, he doesn't speak. I read the file. All of it, yes. And you still came." Ines Cardoso looked past him up the stairwell to where a shape had moved and gone still on the landing. Then she looked back at Emmett. "Mr. Rourke, I'm here about the garden." It was the first thing anyone had said to him in 14 months that did not require him to be grateful. He stepped aside. They came in and took off their boots without being told, and lined them up on the mat, and the door closed behind them with a sound the house had made 10,000 times before. Nothing about it should have mattered. The gardens were worse than she expected, and she said so, plainly, on the first morning. Bindweed to the knee. The greenhouse door swollen shut. In one of Delia's raised beds a volunteer tomato had come up, survived a winter and died standing, its cage still holding the brown skeleton upright. Ines Cardoso worked. That was all she did the first 2 days. She did not go looking for the boy. She did not ask Mrs. Boyd about him. She did not deploy the bright false warmth of a person hoping to be liked by a difficult child. Silas watched her from the upstairs window. Emmett saw him doing it on Tuesday morning, standing at the landing glass with one hand flat against it, and something in Emmett's chest turned over, because it was the first thing that had held his son's attention in over a year. On the 3rd morning, Silas came down. Ines had laid out 14 seed packets on the potting bench in a careful grid, labeled in her own handwriting, ready for a cold frame she had built out of an old storm window. She went to the tap for water. When she came back the packets were gone. They were in the rain barrel, all 14, torn open, the seeds mixed together in the black water floating in a slick across the surface. Thousands of them, kale and cosmos and beans and marigold and Delia's saved tomato seed from a jar in the greenhouse that had a date on the lid in a dead woman's handwriting. Silas stood 8 feet away with his hands at his sides, and he looked directly at Ines Cardoso for the first time. He was not afraid, he was waiting. Emmett, standing in the mudroom doorway with a coffee he had forgotten he was holding, understood what he was watching. He had seen 12 people fail this test. It always went the same way. The sharp intake of breath. The bright forgiving voice with a wire of anger under it. That wasn't a very good choice, was it? Ines looked into the barrel a long moment. Well, she said, they're mixed now. Silas did not move. She rolled up her sleeve, reached into the cold water past the elbow, and began scooping the wet seed out into a sieve. It took her most of an hour. She did not lecture. She did not check whether he was still watching. She spread the whole mess on newspaper in the greenhouse to dry, and when it was done she sat back on her heels and looked at the sheet of thousands of jumbled seeds, and something happened in her face that was almost pleasure. We'll plant them all, she said to nobody in particular. One bed, everything together, we'll see what comes up. Silas's mouth changed, barely. He turned and went back into the house. Emmett in the doorway found that he had gripped the coffee cup hard enough to hurt his hand. The second test came on Thursday and it was cleverer and it was patient, and Emmett would think about it later as the moment he realized his son was not broken but hidden. Every tool went missing. The trowels, the secateurs, the twine, the kneeling pad, the little brass sprayer. Not thrown away. That would have been easy. Placed. A trowel inside a rubber boot in the mudroom. Twine coiled inside a lampshade. The secateurs at the very bottom of a bag of bone meal, so that Ines had to empty the whole thing onto a tarp. The greenhouse key was simply gone. She searched for 2 hours. She did not mutter. She did not go to Emmett. She moved through the house and the sheds at exactly the same speed she moved when she was weeding. And Silas followed her at a distance the entire time. 20 feet back, always in a doorway, waiting for the moment when the mask would slip, and she would become what everyone eventually became. At noon she found the last thing. The sprayer, tucked inside the hollow of the apple tree, a hiding place so good she only found it because a wasp came out of it. She turned around. Silas was standing in the wet grass. You're careful, she said. He blinked. Not clever. Anyone can be clever. You're careful. She held up the sprayer. You thought about where I'd look and then you thought one more step past it. Most grown men can't do that. His face did something complicated. I don't have the key, she said. So, I'll dig the bed by hand today. And she did. She knelt in the mud at the edge of Delia's ruined garden and pulled bindweed out with her bare fingers for 3 hours, while a cold rain came in off the water and a boy stood under the eave of the greenhouse and watched her not leave. That evening when she went to hang up her jacket, the greenhouse key was in the right-hand pocket. She did not mention it, not to Silas, not to Mrs. Boyd, not to Emmett. Some things she knew die if you drag them into the light too early. The third test was Friday, and it was the last one, and it was the only one that had fear in it. Silas locked the greenhouse door from the inside, came out through the far end and shut the outer bolt. Then he stood in front of it. Ines had a flat of seedlings against her hip. The mixed bed sprouted, 300 unidentifiable green threads in soil blocks she had made herself. I need to get those in before the frost, she said. He didn't move. He had his father's jaw, she thought. He had his father's absolute stillness. Behind him through the glass she could see the whole flat of her tomato seed under a dome. Wren came around the corner of the house with the talker in her hands and stopped. Ines looked at the door. She looked at her son. At the boy she corrected herself at Mr. Rourke's boy, and she set the flat down on the gravel and she sat down on the wet stone step and folded her hands in her lap. All right, she said, I'll wait. Silas stared at her. Wren, who had grown up in a house where waiting was the whole architecture of speech, sat down beside her mother without being asked and began drawing in the gravel with a stick. 19 minutes. The rain came and went. A fairy moaned somewhere out past Trial Island. Wren drew a fish, then a bird, then something with too many legs, and she said once, softly, that's a dog, and did not seem to care in the slightest that it had taken her 3 tries. Silas looked at her when he looked at her mouth. He looked at the way she just kept going. At 19 minutes he reached behind himself and pulled the bolt. He didn't run. He stood there and something in his shoulders came down half an inch, and Ines Cardoso stood up, brushed off her knees, picked up her flat and said, thank you, and went past him into the greenhouse. Emmett Rourke, watching from the window of an office where a man on a screen was talking about market penetration in the third quarter, did not hear a single word that man said. The dead apple tree stood at the bottom of the property, where the lawn gave out into Saul and Gary Oak, and it had been dead for 3 years. And Delia had refused to have it taken down because she said the Flickers liked it. It was Wren who started it. She hung the talker from the lowest branch on the second Monday. Silas came down to look at it. He always came now. Not close, never close, but within seeing distance, orbiting like something caught in gravity. Wren pulled the string. The spoons knocked together, flat and tinny and ridiculous, and she laughed at her own instrument, and then she held the string out toward him. She did not say use your words. Nobody had ever said that to her without meaning something cruel. She said you can hold it. He didn't take it. He turned and walked away. She came back the next day with a bag of junk from a free box on Fort Street. bicycle bells, brass keys, 4 bottle caps, a cracked ceramic mug, a length of copper pipe her mother had cut into 6 pieces of different lengths. She sat under the tree and tied them on badly, and half of them fell off, and she tied them on again. On the 4th day, when a piece of copper pipe dropped into the wet grass for the 3rd time, a hand reached down and picked it up. Silas held it. He looked at the branch and at the knot she had used, and then he did something with the fishing line that Wren could not have done. A doubled loop tight, the kind of knot a boy learns from a father, who once had time to teach him knots. He hung the pipe. He flicked it with a fingernail. It rang. Low and clear and long, and it went out across the lawn and into the trees, and both children went absolutely still, listening to it die away. Wren whispered, "That one's the best." Silas did not answer, but he sat down in the grass beside her and he held out his hand for the next piece. They worked for 11 days, it became a tree full of noise. Copper and brass and glass and stone, tuned by nothing but a boy's ear, hung on lines of different lengths so that the low notes lived on the north side and the bright ones caught the wind off the water. Silas had a system. Wren did not understand it and did not need to. She brought the objects and she talked. Slowly, laboriously, cheerfully. About nothing at all. About the ferry, about a crab she had found at Willow's Beach, about how her father had died before she was born and so she did not miss him the way her mother did, and Silas listened, and hung his chimes, and never once looked at her mouth waiting for the words to come out faster. That was the thing. That was the whole thing, and it took Emmett Rourke weeks to see it. Ines Cardoso could not make her words come when she wanted them. Silas Rourke would not make his words come at all. Neither of them was in a hurry. Emmett came home at dusk on the 11th day. He got out of the car and heard from somewhere down the slope a long ringing chord, and then a sound he had not heard in 14 months and 11 days. His son laughing. He walked down across the lawn in his good shoes and the grass was soaked, and he did not care. He stopped at the edge of the oaks. Silas was up in the crook of the dead apple tree, one arm hooked around a limb, reaching out to hang a bicycle bell. Wren was below him with her arms full of scrap, shouting instructions that took her a long time to deliver. The tree was ringing. Silas had lost his footing slightly, and the whole thing had shivered, and every chime had gone off at once, and he was laughing. Soundless at first, and then not soundless, a rough unused thing, a laugh that had been sitting in a dark cupboard for over a year and come out with the dust still on it. Ines Cardoso was 15 feet away on her knees, planting out the mixed bed, not looking at them at all. Emmett stood in the wet grass in a suit that cost more than the woman in front of him made in 3 months. And he understood, with the total clarity of a man watching a diagnosis printout, that he had spent $140,000 trying to buy what a 6-year-old girl with a stutter had done for free, by refusing to be in a hurry. His throat closed. Ines got up, wiping her hands on her thighs. She came to stand near him, not too near, he said, and his voice did not sound like his own. How? She watched the children for a while before she answered. She never asked him for anything, Ines said. Everyone else went in wanting a word out of him. She looked at Emmett then, direct, unhurried. She just needs someone to hold the other end of the string. He walked back up to the house and did not go into his office. He stood in the front hall with the 12th specialist's note in his hand, unfolded. The handwriting gone soft at the creases from 11 days in a coat pocket. He is protecting someone. The next Saturday Emmett Rourke walked down to the apple tree in an old jacket, and he knelt in the mud. He was 47 years old and his knee cracked, and he had not knelt on the ground for any purpose in 9 years. Silas went rigid. Emmett looked up at the tree, really looked, at the way the copper had been graded by length. At the knots. Who taught you that knot? He said. Silence. He knew the answer. He had taught him, on a dock in Sook when the boy was 5. I don't know how to do this, Emmett said. He said it to the tree, because he could not say it to his son's face. Any of it. I've been pretending I did. His hands were shaking. I hired 12 people to hear you. I never once sat still long enough to try it myself. Wren, who did not understand the shape of what was happening but understood exactly its weight, held out a bottle cap. Emmett took it. Where does it go? Nothing. Wind in the oaks. Water somewhere below. Then a small hand came into his field of vision and moved his hand 8 inches to the left, and let go. Emmett tied the knot badly. Silas untied it and did it again properly, and then, and Emmett would tell this to a judge in a courtroom 9 weeks later, and his voice would break on it. Silas took his father's hands, one in each of his own, and put them back on the line and made him do it himself. That night they ate dinner at the kitchen table. All 5 of them. Emmett and Silas and Mrs. Boyd, who had not sat at that table in 14 months, and Ines Cardoso, who did not want to and came anyway, and Wren, who told a story about a crab that took 11 minutes. Emmett's phone was upstairs, face down in a drawer. Halfway through he put down his fork. Silas, he said. The boy looked up. I should have been at the concert. The room went very quiet. Mrs. Boyd's hand stopped above the bread. I told your mother there would be others. Emmett made himself keep his eyes on his son. There weren't. And when she was gone I found things for you to do instead of doing anything myself, because sitting in a room with you and not being able to fix you was the worst thing I have ever felt, and I am a coward and I ran from it. He did not say forgive me. He did not say, "Are we okay?" He was learning. Silas's chin went down. His shoulders shook once. Wren, without any ceremony at all, put a piece of bread on his plate. He picked it up and ate it. Nobody cried. Nobody said a single word about healing. Mrs. Boyd got up to get more water and stood facing the sink for a good while before she came back. The doorbell rang on a Tuesday in the middle of June, and the woman standing on the slate was Adrienne Pruitt. Emmett had not seen her since the funeral. She was Delia's older sister, and she had her sister's cheekbones and none of her mess, and she was wearing a linen coat that had not been rained on because she had come in a car, and the car was still idling at the top of the drive. "Emmett," she said. "Adrienne." She looked past him, into the house. "Where is he?" "In the garden." "The garden." Her mouth did something. "May I come in?" She was already in. He would remember the way the light was, and the way Mrs. Boyd came halfway down the hall and stopped, and the way Adrienne Pruitt did not sit down when she was offered a chair. She took an envelope out of her bag and put it on the hall table, on top of nothing, right where the 12th specialist's invoice had been. "I've filed an application for guardianship," she said. "Supreme Court. My lawyer has served your office." The floor did not move, but something under it did. 14 months, Adrienne Pruitt said. "My nephew has not spoken in 14 months. He has not attended school since January. 12 clinicians have come through this house and every single one of them has resigned. Do you know how that reads, Emmett? On paper, he's getting better. He's nonverbal. He's 8, and his mother died in front of him, and he's getting better. You have a gardener's child playing in the yard with him." She said gardener's child the way a person sets down something unhygienic. "That is your treatment plan. That is what you'll tell a judge," he said quietly. "Is this about the trust?" Her face closed like a door. Delia had left everything to Silas. $4 million and change, in trust until he was 25, and a clause naming a family member as protector if the surviving parent were ever found unfit. Adrienne Pruitt picked up her bag. "I loved my sister," she said. "I know you did. You were in Seattle." There was nothing to say to that because it was true, and it would be true in every room he ever entered for the rest of his life. She went out. Emmett stood at the window and watched her walk up the drive, and she got into the back seat of the idling car, and then she did not tell the driver to go. She sat there for 6 or 7 minutes with her head bowed. From that distance he could not see whether she was crying, but he saw her take something out of her wallet. A small card, the sort they hand out at funerals, with a photograph on it, and hold it in both hands. Then she put it away and the car went down the hill and the application went forward anyway. Behind him on the stairs, Silas was standing with one hand on the rail. He had heard everything. He did not run. He did not break anything. He turned and walked out the back and down to the tree, and he took hold of the lowest chime, the long copper one, the one that rang, and he did not pull it. He just held it, so it would not make a sound. Emmett found Ines Cardoso in the greenhouse that night at 10 o'clock, writing in a notebook. A garden journal, the cheap spiral kind, $3 at a pharmacy, every page dated. He looked over her shoulder, and what he read was not about plants. April 9, emptied seed into rain barrel, watched me recover it, did not leave. 52 minutes. April 11, hid all tools, returned key to my coat pocket without prompting. April 12, locked greenhouse, waited 19 min, unbolted door himself, no adult intervention. Tied a bowline, correct on first attempt. April 30, first sound, laughing, approx 8 seconds. May 14, held the door for W, did not look away when she spoke. He turned the page, and the next. "You've been writing this down since the first week," he said. "Yes, why?" And set the pen across the page. "Because when the big trouble comes," she said. "Nobody remembers the small things. They remember 12 doctors and a boy who won't talk." She tapped the notebook. "This is the only proof that anything moved." Emmett sat down on an overturned crate among the seedlings, the chair of a rich man in a glass house full of his dead wife's tomatoes. "There's more," Ines said. She took out her phone and set it on the bench and pressed play. 8 seconds of a boy laughing, badly recorded, wind in the microphone, then another, and another, 7 of them. Dated, the most recent was 4 days old and 31 seconds long. And in the background you could hear a girl saying, "Not that one," and a copper pipe ringing. Emmett Rourke put his face in his hands. "Tomorrow," Ines said, in the voice of a woman planning a week's work, "you'll phone the school for the attendance file and every report. You'll phone the clinicians and ask for their notes. All 12, including the ones that make you look bad. Especially those. And Mrs. Boyd will write down the date each one resigned. That's a list of my failures." "Yes," she said. "Judges hear from parents who did nothing wrong all day long. It's a very tiring sound." She picked the pen back up. "They listen differently to one who can name it." He was quiet a long while. "What do I write? The nights you weren't home, what you told yourself, what you couldn't look at." Her eyes did not move off his face. "Then what you're doing now." He took a page out of the back of her notebook and borrowed the pen, and he sat under the grow light among 300 unidentifiable seedlings and wrote a single sentence at the top. "I paid 12 people to listen to my son because I could not bear to. It hurt to read." That was how he knew. The thing that broke it open happened 4 days before the hearing, and there was no one there to see it but a woman with a watering can. June had come in warm, the greenhouse ran with condensation every morning, the glass fogged to opaque by 7. Ines came in at 6:30 and found Silas already there, standing in front of the west pane with his sleeve pushed up. He had written on the glass with his finger. She stopped in the doorway. 3 words in an 8-year-old's blocky capitals running with water. Ines Cardoso set down the watering can very slowly. Silas, she said, come and sit with me. He didn't move. She sat down on the floor of the greenhouse anyway, in the dirt, in her work clothes, and she waited the way she had waited 19 minutes at a locked door, and after a while the boy came and sat down beside her, not touching, and put his forehead against his knees. You were in the car, she said. He nodded into his knees. Were you talking to her? A long time, then a nod. Were you angry? He nodded and his whole back began to shake, and Ines Cardoso did not put her arms around him, because nobody had asked her to. She sat in the dirt beside him with her hands open on her knees and let it come. She learned it in pieces over the next hour, written in condensation and wiped away, written again. She missed my song. She had been late, she had come in during the second piece. I said don't talk to me. In the car, on the highway, in the rain. I said it loud. And then, the last one, the letters small and jammed into the corner of the pane, and Ines had to lean close to read it. So she stopped and she looked at me. And then the truck. 14 months. 14 months of a child holding his own mouth shut, because the last time he had used it he had told his mother to stop looking at the road. Ines Cardoso pressed her hand flat against the cold glass. She thought about the husband she had buried at 29 and the 4 years she had spent believing that if she had made him take the earlier ferry. Silas, she said, look at me. He did. It was a truck, she said. It was a load of logs on a wet curve at night. It was not a boy in a booster seat saying an angry thing to his mother. She held his eyes. You've been protecting all of us from what you thought you were, and you're not that. You're just the person who was still in the car. The boy's mouth opened. Nothing came out. But he leaned over, and he put his head on the shoulder of a woman who had been hired to weed a garden, and he stayed there while the sun came up over the water and burned the writing off the glass. The Supreme Court of British Columbia sits in a building on Blanchard Street with a great deal of stone, and not one comfortable place to put a child. Silas came in wearing a shirt his father had bought him, and a tie neither of them knew how to do, and Wren came behind him carrying the talker because she had refused, absolutely refused, to leave it at home. Adrian Pruitt was already there, at the far end of the corridor, beside a woman in a gray suit. Silas, she said. The boy looked at the floor. She did not come closer. Whatever she had planned to do, the open arms, the reunion, she looked at him and understood in one bad second that he was taller than she remembered and that she did not know his face. The children went into a side room with a child advocate. At the door Silas stopped. Wren pushed the talker into his hands. He shook his head. Take him, she said. He listens good. He took it. Counsel for Adrian Pruitt spoke first and she spoke well. She was not shrill. She built a house out of facts and it was a house Emmett Rourke recognized. A widower who worked, a mansion run by staff, 12 clinicians who had come and gone, a child withdrawn from school in January, a child who had not spoken since February of last year, a father who had responded to catastrophe by writing checks. And now, her word landed like a dropped tool. A father whose therapeutic strategy consisted of unlicensed groundskeeper and her 6-year-old. When it was Emmett's turn his lawyer had prepared a defense. He did not use it. He stood up and he said, every fact she just stated is true. Justice Colleen Amaral looked up over her glasses. I was in Seattle, Emmett said. I stayed away from him because I couldn't fix him and I have built an entire life on being the man who fixes things. I hired 12 people to listen to my son so that I would not have to sit in a quiet room and find out what he had to say. He put his hands flat on the table because they would not stay still otherwise. My sister-in-law says I outsourced my son. She's right. She's been right for 14 months and I hated her for it and she was right. He looked up. But I'm in the room now, your ladyship. I'm on the floor. I'm tying knots badly. And if this court takes him away from that tree and that girl and that garden, it will be taking him away from the only 3 things in the world that have ever made him make a sound. Ines Cardoso was called. She wore the only dress she owned. She was not nervous. Miss Cardoso, you've been employed at the residence how long? 10 weeks. And in 10 weeks you've formed a professional opinion about a child 12 clinicians could not help? No, said Ines. Counsel for Adrian Pruitt paused satisfied. I have no opinion, Ines said. I have dates. The notebook went to the clerk. Justice Amaral read it for a long time, page after page, and the courtroom sat in the sound of paper turning. Then she asked to hear the 7th recording, and the room full of lawyers listened to 31 seconds of a boy laughing under a tree. These are unusually detailed, the judge said. Small things are the only things there are with children, said Ines Cardoso. The rest is noise. Then Adrian Pruitt took the stand and she wept and she said she had made mistakes, and everyone in the room believed her. And then Emmett's lawyer began to ask her questions, and they were not cruel, and that was what made them unbearable. What is Silas afraid of? A pause. Loud noises, I imagine. After the which hand does he write with? Silence. On the 14th of March last year he was hospitalized overnight. Do you know why? I wasn't informed. You weren't. What object of his mother's does he keep in his room? Adrienne Pruitt's mouth opened. What is the name of the child he plays with every day? Nothing. Mrs. Pruitt, when did you last spend one full afternoon alone with your nephew? She looked at her hands in her lap for 11 seconds, and everyone counted them. I don't know, she said. At the back of the courtroom, Ines Cardoso closed her eyes, and it was not triumph because a woman who does not know her nephew's fears is not a victory. It is a wound with a lawyer. The child advocate came back after lunch with a single sheet of paper. Silas Rourke had not spoken, but he had written in block in answer to the only 3 questions that were put to him. Where do you want to live? Home. Who is safe? Dad. Ines. Mrs. Boyd. Is there anything you want the judge to know? And under that, in letters that got smaller as they went, it was into my words, it was the truck. Ines. Justice Amiral took off her glasses and did not put them back on for some time. When she spoke her voice was level and it filled the room. Guardianship is not a remedy for grief, she said. It is not awarded to the relative who is angriest, nor withheld from the parent who has failed. This court asks one question: what does this child need now? She looked at Emmett Rourke for a long moment. Mr. Rourke's failures are before me. He has not disputed a single one, which I note, because in my experience it is rare. The evidence establishes that this household has moved, recently but demonstrably, and in the direction of the child's well-being. She turned. Miss Pruitt, your grief is real, your affection may be real, but sincerity does not replace presence, and a child is not restored by a court order. Guardianship remained with the father. Adrienne Pruitt was granted supervised time, beginning with 2 hours a month in the home with a clinician present. The trust went to an independent trustee, and no one in the family would touch a dollar of it. In the corridor Silas came out of the side room, and he stopped when he saw his father, and Emmett went down on one knee on the stone floor in his good suit. You're coming home, he said. The boy walked into him, and then his arms came up, and locked behind his father's neck, and Emmett Rourke held on to his son in a courthouse hallway, and did not say anything at all. Because he had finally learned that there is nothing you can say that is better than staying where you are. Wren took her chime back and said the whole thing came out clean. For once no stumble at all. He listened good. Adrienne Pruitt stood 20 feet away and watched. She was crying. Emmett saw her, so did Ines. Neither of them looked away and neither of them went to her, and that too was a kind of honesty. Silas did not look back, not yet. That would be a different bridge, a different year, a slower crossing. He spoke on a Sunday in August in the garden, and it was not a speech. The mixed bed had come up a riot. Kale next to Cosmos, next to 9 tomato plants grown from a jar with a dead woman's handwriting on the lid. Wren was up in the apple tree, overreaching for a branch that would not hold her, and Ines was too far away, and Emmett was turned around, and the branch cracked, and a boy's voice, rough, cracked, unused, terrible and enormous, came out across the lawn. Wren, she didn't fall. She grabbed the trunk and hung there wide-eyed, and every chime in the tree went off at once. Emmett Rourke got to his knees in the dirt among his wife's tomatoes and he could not see anything. Silas said his name again. Just her name, twice more, checking. Then he came and stood in front of his father, and he looked at him with an expression Emmett had never seen on him, something young and frightened and enormous. Dad, he said. It was not a movie. There was no music. The healing took years and it went sideways, and there were bad Februaries. Silas went back to school in the fall with an aide and a note from a judge in his file. He did not speak for a week, and then he spoke on the Thursday in the coat room, to nobody in particular. Some nights the sound of rain on the car roof still shut him down completely, and on those nights his father sat in the hallway outside his door until the house went quiet and did not go in and did not leave. Adrienne Pruitt came the first Saturday of every month. She sat stiffly and she asked bad questions and she stayed the entire 2 hours. In the 3rd year Silas showed her the tree. Ines Cardoso kept the gardens and started her horticulture certificate at Camasun, and Emmett paid her properly for it, and never once called it charity, because she would have quit on the spot. Wren was the sister that nobody in that house had known was missing, and Emmett Rourke, who had built machines to see what human eyes could not, learned the only thing he had ever needed to know, that a child who has stopped speaking is not empty. He is a locked room with someone waiting inside it, and no key on earth will open it, and no amount of money will open it, and the door only opens from within, and only for the person who is still sitting outside it when the sun goes down. Broken children do not always ask for love out loud. Sometimes they ask with silence, with locked doors, with seeds tipped into rainwater. Underneath all of it, they are asking one thing. Are you still going to be there when I have nothing to give you? The people who change a life are almost never the ones with the credentials. Sometimes they are the ones who sit down in the mud and hold the other end of the string. If this story found something in you, tell me in the comments. Who was the one who waited for you, back when you had no words? And stay with this channel, because somewhere tonight there is a house where nobody has spoken in a long time. And someone needs to hear that the door still opens.